Every patch, I always do a quick skim through a lot of the high-ranked mids on career just to see if there are any new or interesting picks coming into the meta that might be worth playing. And today, I have a couple really simple ones that I want to share with you guys. Champs that I think would be really, really good for you guys to climb. So the first one we're going to take a look at is Chovy's Tank Diana. So Tank Diana is not that new. It's something that's definitely been played in the jungle, but having it played mid is definitely a little bit unusual. So there's a few things. First off, Diana is a pretty good champ for climbing in general. She's really good in solo queue, relatively simple to play, so ticks all the boxes for being good in solo queue. There are a couple big weaknesses with Diana though, and one of the biggest ones is her build path is normally not that good. So Diana is a champ that really likes to go first item Lichbane, but until next patch at least, the Lichbane build path is pretty mediocre. So there could be some value in going for, something like this, a tankier Diana where you go for things like Riftmaker and Liandry that build out of lots of cheap components and are just much easier to purchase, especially if you're in a bad matchup or whatever. There is also value for Diana in general, just because a lot of the time people won't know where it's going, right? Like if you lock a Diana early in the draft, there's a good chance that they think it's jungle, and that has a lot of value. Obviously, if Diana mid becomes really meta, that kind of loses value, right? People expect it, but for example here, obviously I don't know how the champ select went, but it's very possible that Galio was kind of blinding Galio, right? And so didn't therefore counter the Diana. So like I was saying, this is Chovy's Diana up against Angel on Galio, so both pretty good players, obviously. And let's kind of walk through it. Now, Chovy is a player that often goes Resolve Tree on lots of different champs, right? Like, he's a big fan of, obviously, the Grasp on the Victor. You see him taking Grasp on his hero all the time. And a lot of the reason for that is that Grasp is a really strong laning page. And Chovy is a player that values laning very highly. And for good reason, right? Like, laning phase matters a lot. So Diana in general, what is Diana meant to be good at? Well, Diana's really good at side laning. Like, she pushes very quickly. She can take jungle camps really easily, which is great. She has a lot of push just because, like, your attack speed from your passive, which is great. And she actually has quite a bit of poke in lane, too. Like, the Q is relatively cheap at only 50 mana. The cooldown's not that long either, so it's something you can spam out pretty consistently. And especially if your opponent doesn't have sustain, it's, the damage really adds up. So you'll see here that he's heavy trading in the first couple waves. He's trying to get use out of his resolve page, I would imagine. I'm a little surprised that he went second wind into Galio. My guess would be that he thought, okay, like, bone plating is just going to get procced by Q. The thing is, though, like, you're not really expecting sudden impact, or sorry, second wind to be procced often enough to add up to a lot of HP, I wouldn't think. So I'm not super sold on that, but it probably should be the go against, like, any sort of ranged champion. So, yeah, he's trading a lot of health early. That's normally pretty fine for Diana because Diana does have, like, very good base stats. Like, a lot of the time, you will be able to just stat check your opponent in the early game, particularly if they are running scaling runes. Obviously, it's not Diana specific, but if you're ever playing in someone that is playing something like Phase Rush or First Strike or runes that don't really impact the laning phase, that is a really good time to force trades, particularly if you're playing something like Electrocute or Grasp or, whatever. Now, he gets level 3 ganked here by Tung Sahur on the Trundle, which, honestly, that's a little annoying. That is, like, really annoying. But here, you'll kind of see the advantage of, like, having a build path like this, as he's going to be forced into an early reset. So I kind of said before how, like, if you're playing Diana, you really want to, if possible, rush Lichbane normally. Now, the big problem with Lichbane is the build path is really lopsided, right? Like, the Rod is very good, but the Sheen is pretty mediocre, and the Aether Wisp also is kind of trash. So, like here, for example, where he doesn't have enough gold to get needlessly large Rod on first base, he would kind of be forced into normally going something like Storm Surge, right? Which is a much better build path, but the item itself is kind of weaker. Here, though, you have the luxury of just itemizing really good components, basically, right? Like Darksteel and Ruby, both like really good for laning, obviously. And I think also there's kind of the element of, if you wanted, you could pivot with this build a little bit, right? Like, I don't think you'd want to go Rod of Ages Diana nowadays, but I think you could just sit on the Catalyst, Like, that's something really common this patch. I don't know if you guys have seen, but sitting on Catalyst is very common, and then just building normal items. It's something I've been doing on Ari a lot. But yeah, anyway, let's kind of see what's happening here. So, Diana doesn't have Flash, so probably what Chovy's thinking here is that, like, he is quite gankable, right? Like, Galio has a lot of ganks up, he's also against Viego, so he kind of needs to pull the wave. Now, the downside of this is that it does, like, allow Galio to go bot in some ways, right? Because he's not, like, as forced to be here. The thing is, whenever this happens to you, because sometimes this will just happen in solo queue, right? Like, as you can see, even in, like, the highest ranks, sometimes people just get kind of, like, lucky roams off, either because, you know, people don't respect or whatever. Sometimes that just happens. The thing is, though, when this happens, right, even if Galio gets a kill, you're actually temporarily ahead. I see this complaint a lot of, like, what do I do if the enemy mid just, like, roams bot and my team doesn't respect or whatever? So, like I said, even in the worst case that Galio gets a kill, you're actually ahead for a little bit. And the reason is that you should be up XP, right? Like, because like Galio missed a wave or whatever, which means next time you have a level up, you're really valuable. Like, let's say, for example, that both Galio and Diana are level 5 here. When Galio comes back, Diana is definitely going to hit 6 first. So that's like an opportunity you can look to really punish. Not only just from like the ulti point of view, but also just the base stats point of view, right? Like, being a level up is really valuable. The other thing is that most of the time, someone will have to invest resources into the roam, right? Like Galio lost some health, he lost some mana, which further, you know, strengthens Diana's position, right? So despite that working for Galio, Galio is temporarily behind, and it's up to Chovy now to, like, abuse that as hard as you can. And, like, you can see that, right? Like, normally, the way to abuse this sort of advantage is to either, like, force trades or, like, zone them off the wave or, you know, do something. Even forcing your opponent to use cooldowns on the wave is a pretty big win. I just realized I should probably move my camera so you guys can see the map. Hold on, let me just get this exactly right. I think that should be... There we go. Yeah, so... Fix that. As I was saying, if you can make Galio use cooldowns in order to, like, CS, that's really valuable, right? Because every time that Galio uses a cooldown to CS as opposed to, like, an auto, 1, it takes away from his mana, 2, it uses a cooldown, which means you can potentially, again, force a trade, and it also means that, like, that is less pressure put onto you, right? Like, he's not queuing you, he is queuing the wave, which means if you queue him and he queues the wave, you're just naturally pulling ahead in health. So even just that sort of positioning puts yourself in, like, a pretty good spot. So yeah, this is pretty good. I'm just constantly chunking the Galio out, and even though he did get that one successful roam, it's a little harder for him to roam to these now because Galio is just so far behind in health when it comes to Diana. And if Galio is not really getting a lot out of the early game, then you probably would say Diana is outscaling, right? Like, Galio is a champ that doesn't necessarily, like, scale poorly, but he definitely needs stuff to happen, right? Like, Galio is not the sort of champ where you want to just have, like, a super... like 0-0-0 early game and just, like, yeah, nothing happens. Now, for a little bit here, you would expect Chovy to play, like, a little bit safer because, like, in theory, he's down items, right? Because his opponent got the reset off. The thing is, though, like, Galio didn't really buy anything that kind of leads to, like, the Diana losing trades, right? It's not like he went home and picked up any sort of AP or whatever. Like, he bought mana, he bought boots, which is probably because he's, like, going Roa. But the thing is, you know, currently, if you looked at the item stats, despite Galio having spent more gold than Diana, I think you'd still say that Diana's actually ahead in stats, right? Like, base stats aside, she just has more damage, or rather more gold invested into combat stats. So, I think this was a really weird trade by Galio, to be honest. I'm not sure if he was, like, trying to set up for Alistair or what, but to me that seemed very suspicious. Like, yeah, he's still down stats. Probably what he was thinking is, like, he really needs to force Diana into a reset because, you know, he based and she didn't, so, like, in theory she's weaker, but honestly, like, with the buy, I don't even think that was really the case. Alright, so the game is looking pretty good. You know, Diana's already, like, pulling very far ahead. She's gonna shove this wave and then go to the reset. So now, Diana's in, like, a huge advantage, right? Like, if we take a look at Diana's items compared to Galio's, Galio has yet to pick up Catalyst. And that's, like, another big thing, is that sometimes, even if you have, like, a similar amount of gold spent, the difference between, like, completing a component and just, like, sitting on, like, its, I guess, smaller components is it can be pretty big, right? Like, for example, let's say that someone bases on 1200 gold and someone else bases on 1300 gold, right? Like, that would be, like, Haunting Guys versus Catalyst components, or that would be, like, Catalyst versus Catalyst components. So that little 100 gold difference can actually be worth a lot more than that 100 gold if you, again, abuse that lead. So basically what I'm saying with that is, like, whenever you're playing, again, you know, champions aside, doesn't matter what you're playing, always be paying attention to those little, like, windows you get, right? Like level 7 versus level 6, or having an item completed and your opponent doesn't, right? Like, it might only be a small advantage in terms of, like, you might only be up 1 creep of XP, or you might be only up 100 gold or whatever, but that can lead into so much more if, you know, basically, if you spend it right and then you abuse the difference. So this is like perfect for Diana, right? Like Diana's a really, really good early skirmisher, especially as tanky as she is here. Like if she can't be bursted, it's super valuable. I actually think that is like something worth mentioning. If you're going to play this build, it probably is better into compositions that are like sort of low on damage. So you might want to take a look at like what the enemy AD carry is. You know, there's a very big difference, for example, building tank versus Ezreal or like Jhin or something, compared to building tank versus, you know, Aphelios or Jinx, right? Like, you would expect those kind of, like, lethality or, like, spellcaster ADs, again, things like, I guess, like, Ezreal, Jhin, and I guess lethality Varus would be, like, the meta ones, compared to, again, like, you know, your Jinx or your Kai'Sa or something. Tank would probably be, like, less valuable against those, and it's the same thing when you're against, like, a mid that's kind of, like, also building tanky, right? Like, if you're against a Galio, or if you're against a, I don't know, an Ahri or something that doesn't do a whole lot of damage, this build is probably more valuable compared to something like Talia, right, that can really easily deal with the DPS. Now, that being said, Diana actually used to be a counter to Talia, so that actually could be some tech, but maybe you would play the normal Diana build, the AP one. Anyway, so Chubby went for double mask here, which I think is kind of interesting. He didn't quite have gold to complete like Liandry or Riftmaker, and I suspect that's why he decided to go home here and just, like, upgrade the mask. Like I said, I think the reasoning for this is probably that, like, well, one, mask stacking is pretty good in general. Like, Haunting Guard is actually a pretty good item. So, like, it's totally fine to just stack these up. The Madness passive on it actually does stack. The one that increases your damage by a total of 6% once you get it stacked up. That does stack, so, like, yeah, it is fine to buy more than one. I think another thing is that, like, one of the weaknesses of Riftmaker and Liandry is similar to Lichbane, actually. They have very lopsided build paths. So, like, if you think of, like, Liandry, for example, like, Faded Ashes is very weak, right? Faded Ashes is really poor use of gold. For laners, that is. It's very good for junglers, but for laners, it's pretty poor. And kind of same thing with Riftmaker. You know, like, for a lot of champs that like Riftmaker, they don't care too much about the Fiendish Codex. So I think, I'm not 100% sure on this, but it might have been he just, like, wanted to stack masks, but my guess would be that he thought he got more power right now just by buying 2 masks, and, like, you can kind of go from there. So the stat check right now should be pretty big, and again, that's what, like, Diana's all about. So if you can just, like, force trades over and over, like, that's super, super good for you, obviously. He's just getting Cryo here, and this is kind of interesting, like, fully committing to this roam. You don't see this that often, to be honest, like roaming when the next wave is, like, almost here. If you do decide to do this, like roaming when this wave is, like, almost at your wave, I think it's pretty important that you do it not on a cannon wave. So what I mean by that is, like, if this is a cannon wave, Galio can take probably 2 plates if he just stayed here, right? If it's not a cannon wave, then Galio can probably only take 1 plate. So the difference between losing a cannon and losing 2 plates compared to losing 1 plate and just 1 regular wave, that's a pretty big, like, difference when it comes to gold. So make sure you factor that in when you're roaming, because, you know, obviously in this case, like, Galio decided to follow, which is even better, because you don't lose anything. But I do see that all the time, where people kind of, like, don't value, I guess, the difference of skipping a wave on a cannon wave compared to, you know, skipping a wave on a normal wave. Now, one thing, and this is about to be, I think it's going to happen, is Galio here is skipping a wave on a cannon wave. Very, very risky, particularly against a champ like Diana. Right, if you're against something like Trist or Diana that shits on turrets, you've actually just got to be here. And if you notice this as a champ that kills turrets very quickly, or if you just have 3 grubs, if your opponent ever roams off tempo, as in, like, they didn't push this wave on a cannon wave, a lot of the time you can just, like, ignore this fight and hit the turret, right? Like, this is a very juicy fight. And I actually think, you know, having coached a lot of you guys, I think most of you would, like, go here for sure. But look how much guaranteed gold is going to be here, right? Like, Jovi's team has 3 grubs, he's playing Diana, and it's a cannon wave, and Galio is fully committed. So at the start, right, how much gold? So Diana's 4.8k gold. She just DPS's... Okay, I'm speeding it up. She doesn't actually attack that fast, in case you're wondering. But basically, all those plates died. Diana went up, like, a solid, like, 500 gold or so. And, you know, like, now the game is kind of fucked for Galio. Because, like, if Galio ever leaves again, his turret just dies. And also notice here that, like, Galio doesn't have time after the roam to go home and like, spend his gold or, like, get his resources back, right? If he does, he loses his turret. And like I said before, when you do roam, you've got this like little bit of weakness here where your opponent is going to be stronger than you because you invested resources into the play and they didn't, right? Like Chovy invested like no mana or resources or anything into the play, whereas like the Galio lost some HP. And like I said, now I would say the game is like pretty much over. Like if you look at the mid gold gap, it's huge, right? We're sitting on like a 2.4k gold lead, virtually just 1v1, you know, like really just from like punishing the Diana stat check and kind of like punishing Galio for roaming at bad times. And maybe that is some like tech for the Diana. Maybe it's really, really good into champions that want to roam. You know, like you can think particularly like maybe a roaming assassin where you having more health is really good against them. Like maybe, like Diana's always been good against things like Katarina, but maybe it's also really good into, you know, like the Fizz or the Talon or literally anything that wants to run around and has burst. I could see Diana being a pretty good answer to that. So it's kind of just skim through the rest of the game. I think, honestly, like, most of the important stuff has happened, but it's worth looking at the mid-game just to see kind of how he closes out. Like I said here, Diana is a great champ at killing jungle camps because she is balanced around jungle, which means if you ever get the opportunity to, like, look at a jungle camp, it is definitely worth it, right? Like, you kill them quickly enough, and it adds up to a lot of gold, especially if you can take away enemy jungle camps. It's a big difference compared to taking away your own team's jungle camps, obviously. Not that you can't take your own, but just be kind of careful. This is a little greedy, I would say, but it looks like it's going to work. I'll just kind of pause. So the reason this is greedy is because in theory, right, like you probably shouldn't look for a play if like your team, you know, like this guy's doing a jungle camp really far away. His Chovy's team is like playing for the bot turret, right? Like probably your main goal here is just to not die. Now, if you can win this 2v4, then fuck it, go for it. You know, like if you're that strong to where you can really kill people 2v4, then go for it. But I do think, I kind of hope he dies for it because I think it was insanely greedy. Jesus, I mean, he almost got away with it, right? Like, that kind of shows how strong it is. The fact that he almost won that in like 2v4, that was pretty nuts, right? But like I said, it was pretty greedy to go for. He did get punished for it a little bit. Okay, so this is something I want to talk about a little bit as well. So, if you guys have watched my side laning video, which great video by the way, a lot of you guys really bad at side laning, it'd probably help you guys a lot. One thing I stress is like trying not to use TP in the mid game because a lot of the time you're reliant on TP in order to punish the side lane, right? Like basically if you have TP up, you can always TP into the team fight if your team fights at a random time. Sometimes though, you see people do this where they just like TP straight on the map. Normally they do this where they think they're not going to need TP because the objective is going to be on their side soon, or if they think they can trade so much that even if your team fights without you, you can take a lot. So basically two things. One, dragon spawning in 2 minutes 20, which means most likely the fight will be on this side of the map pretty soon, so it's not as bad to not have TP. If there is a fight topside over the Herald, Diana with 3 grubs and 2 items will chew through probably 2 turrets. And, like, you know, 2 turrets worth of gold for Diana, game would be over. So you're not so worried here about not having TP because the ability to just, like, rage split, essentially, is so strong, right? And that's exactly what's happening. Like, you'll see this turret is, like, half HP off literally, like, just a few orders, right? Which is, yeah. I've always hated that about versing Diana, to be honest. Like, if you fuck up your tempo once, you get punished, like, incredibly hard. One thing I want to kind of like mention as well before I forget is that in general, like the best champs for climbing are champs that are like simple to play and like have a simple game plan. And the nice thing about Diana is that like, especially with this build, like no really complicated mechanics and also like tankier builds in general are easier to play. And really the only complexity I think comes from like playing the side lane. Other than that, I actually think it's like very straightforward. So it's definitely something like if you guys are struggling to play some of the like meta picks that are like more mobile maybe and you're like, you know, struggling to survive, I think playing something like this could be really valuable. Let's just quickly take a look at this again just to see how he died. So I would imagine here that probably what he was thinking is that like, okay, he's got Pantheon next to him, he sees Viego top. Like realistically, the chance of someone being here is pretty low. I guess it's like, okay, the reason this probably happens is because like since Rengar is doing Herald and not the top wave, Galio is not forced to answer this, which means that Galio can make a play elsewhere. And honestly, what Chovy probably Well, honestly, he probably didn't think about it, to be totally honest, because it's much easier to see in hindsight. But if he were thinking about it, probably what he was thinking was like, well, you know, if Galio comes bot, at the very least, it is still a free hit. Right, or not free, I guess, because he died, but you know what I mean? Like, there are levels to deaths, and like, while this is not exactly a good death, it's less punishing than if he had died and there were no Herald Trainers, right? But probably should have played that like a tiny bit slower. Let's just kind of skim through the rest of the game. Like I said, I think this one's pretty over at this point. I don't think there's too much to it. Like, unless they lose their dragon, basically, there really isn't any way to lose. They're just too far ahead in gold. That side lane turret looks like it's died. They're going to get their dragon. This is a little spooky, where, like, you have no TP, and, like, your team could fight topside. But, again, like, if the enemy team groups, you know, like, you could probably trade bot. Also, like, the dragon was still up, so there's bound to be fights topside. How much health do you have, by the way? It's 3k health. It's pretty crazy. This is something you should try and do as well with Diana. I see a lot of people doing this on champs like Vladimir as well, where like they try and approach the fight like head on as opposed to flanking. When you're playing a flank champ like this, like the longer you can stay kind of like threatening the side of the fight rather than just like running straight forward, the better. Obviously it's easier because you're tankier to play something... Okay, I was gonna say, like, it's easier when you're a tank to like just go straight in, but generally like you want to try and find some sort of fight. But honestly, I'm surprised this went so badly. I think this was just like honestly kind of Galio Kingdom. Yeah, that was pretty nuts, not gonna lie. I'm worried. We don't actually lose this game, do we? Okay, so comes back on the map. Third item, I imagine he was just going to go for Bloodletters here. I didn't actually check. I guess Bloodletters or Zhonya's are your two options. Like, Bloodletters I think can be pretty good, because, like, you know, this game he's got Annie on his team, so there is extra value in having more magic pens. Zhonya, obviously really good as well, like, having the extra armor synergizes with all your health, and then, like, the Zhonya's active, of course, really good against, like, Viego. It's really good at stopping him from, like, getting the resets and stuff. Yeah, you kind of see here, like, with the Ezreal DPS, you know, like, the damage from Ezreal against tankier targets is definitely pretty lackluster. So there is, I think, definitely some more value playing this into champs like that. Not that you, like, couldn't play it against some hyper carry or something, but I think, you know, then it might be better to play some sort of person. Yeah, that was a pretty good fight. How much damage have we done? 1700 with Leandra, it's pretty good. So we secure Atacon. And then, I think it was Zhonya. Yeah, he went for Zhonya. Makes sense. I think there is something to be said for going Zhonya when, like, if you're thinking about going Medjai's, you know, like, there is maybe an argument that going Medjai's with the tank build is pretty good, because it's harder for you to die. And then you have, like, a Zhonya's or something to protect it. Obviously, you got to be a bit higher on the Dark Souls stacks, but I definitely think that, could be the juice. Be nice to get some big chunk. Then he probably just wants to find somewhere to push. Most likely, honestly, you just, like, push mid here with the team. Yeah. Normally, like, post-team fight, you do want to spread out and, like, try and get gold somewhere, but he has nothing to push bot, so, like, you might as well just push mid. Again, Diana just shits on turrets, right? Like, it's pretty filthy. I wonder how much... I mean, I'm not going to go through it, but I wonder how much gold he's made from just jungle camps and turrets, you know? And I think that's, like, again, something you guys really neglect. Like, so often I coach people, and I can tell they see side lane as... Holy fuck. I can tell they see side lane as a chore, as opposed to, like, a win condition. You know what I mean? But the thing is, like side laning is so valuable. Obviously, it gives gold, it gives pressure, allows access to, like, better flanks and, like, you know, deeper vision and stuff. And another thing I always see is people kind of feeling like you can't have high CS and high KP. And normally it's like, I mean, you can actually kind of have both, right? Like, if you are strong enough to get priority over the side lane, you know, that basically means that you can, well, you can do both, right? Like, similar to how if you get push over mid, you can push the wave and then roam to a play without losing anything. Basically works the same in the mid game, right? Like, you push out the side lane, and then you make the play, and that way you don't actually lose anything meaningful. This time, Trundle goes to cheese again. A lot of boys around this time, though, so it doesn't look like it's gonna pan out. Nice Zhonya, goes for the yard. Very tanky boy as well. It's possible that into certain matchups, it could be worth going Conqueror Resolve instead of... What did he go? He went Grasp Sorcery? Yeah, I could see maybe value of just going Conqueror and then, like, Resolve secondary or something. Could be good. I don't know. It depends how valuable the mana is. Maybe the mana is like super required. I think it might be. Anyway, that's it for the Diana games. So the TLDR is, I think the tank build is, it's easy to play, and probably is actually better on this patch until they change Lich Bane. Something definitely worth giving a shot to, because I think it's very straightforward to play. And yeah, if you have any questions about that, put them in the comment section below, of course. The second pick I wanted to talk about is Annie. So Annie got some pretty major buffs and is now being prioritized very highly in Korean solo queue, even in the highest ranks. So Annie is currently being played as a triple flex. They're playing her top, mid, and support, which is super, super valuable for champs like, because obviously they don't know exactly what they're playing against. There's also a variety of builds you can go. So you can see in top lane, they're playing things like the Grasp with, Riley and Liandry and stuff. In mid, it's more traditional, right? Like your Malignant, Shadow Flame, and the Burst builds. There is also the option of playing some sort of first strike build. Like maybe if you are against like the tankier mids or whatever, you don't think you can kill them. Maybe just accelerate your build. I'm not as sold that this is good, just because I think that despite First Strike being quite good on Annie, I think First Strike as a rune is kind of undertuned at the moment, and I would just prefer the strength of Electrocute. But there are options. So we're going to take a look at Showmaker's game, and I will once again walk you guys through it. A couple things I want to mention at the start of this game while I remember is that while most people just go for your regular Q max on Annie, I know in this game Showmaker actually went 3 points Q into W max. So I guess that gives you more skirmishing power and a little bit of cost of laning power. I have seen most people just go for full Q max. Another thing is like which ability to start. So most of the time you should start Q into, I would say Q into most things. So the reason Q starts really good is because it allows you to get prior really easily. Because basically you can just use Q to last hit creeps, and that will speed up your prior, right? Like it's only got like a roughly, I think it refunds to a 2-second cooldown if you use it on a creep. So that basically guarantees that you're going to get prior in any sort of contested matchup. E-Star is also really good. So E-Star, especially in matchups where you're either sure that you will get prior anyway, or you're sure that you will lose prior anyway. Basically, in a matchup where Q doesn't change what happens with the prior, I think E-Star is very powerful as well, particularly against skillshot champions, because having all that extra movement speed is really valuable. So Echo did a really good job there of just punishing Annie's cooldown. You can see, though, that, like, unlike a lot of other champions, since the cooldown is so short, despite using a cooldown on the creep, she actually had her cooldown up in time to punish him on the way out. A lot of the time, you will see people take bone plating up against Halo Blade's Echo, because that stops this trade, basically. But honestly, like, it looks like you don't need it on Annie, because, like, as long as you have stun available, it just looks like Echo can't really win the trade, to be honest. So that looks like a super, super good matchup for you. Not sure what goes on here. Okay, well, Belveth did a little level 2 gank. Perhaps this is fine. This is pretty normal, just to slow push in. One shots in. Look how much damage he did with Electrocute there. It was like plus 70 or something. Like, I think this is something people really underestimate as well. So, like, obviously, again, like, First Strike and scaling runes in general are very, very powerful. But, you know, just, like, look how much damage. This is literally the third wave. And look how much damage he's gained from runes, right? Like, 200 from his domination tree. And then another 60 from the sorcery tree. And so, like, a lot of the time, it's like, if you take scaling runes and your opponent takes early game runes, it can be really hard because you have to lane at this, like, giant deficit, right, in terms of, like, damage. Now, if you're in a matchup where that doesn't matter, right, like, again, I kind of encourage you to take things like First Strike, or, you know, if you are going to play scaling, play into things like Galio, where it's like, well, he kind of shrugs off the damage, and, like, he's not really the sort of champ that punishes you for taking more scaling runes, right? Just be careful of that. Again, not like an Annie-specific thing, but something worth thinking about, because, well, the example I always think of is, like, Cinder versus Victor. When I see Cinders play First Strike versus Victor, it's just so hard, you know? Like, First Strike, if you can get away with it, again, kind of nice, but it's so punishing if you can't. You know, you just get absolutely shit on by Area Resolve Victor. So anyway, let's kind of see, like, what are we thinking now? So one thing you should do is, if you get ahead, is kind of like, you want to adapt your wave control, right? So generally, the rule is like push to build a lead, push to gain an advantage, and then like freeze to extend it. Because freezing allows you to zone off the wave, like Showmaker's doing here, or punish with ganks or chase them down or whatever. But you need to be a little careful, because if, for example, Belveth starts to look to invade, Annie would probably want to get prior, so that Belveth can't get collapsed on. But if you just take a look, right, like, Belveth currently has no intention of invading, right? Like, she's got a lot of camps to clear, so Annie is not in any hurry to push the wave. For now, she can just keep herself safe, right? Like, she has no flash, so keeping the wave on her side is valuable. And it allows her to, like, punish Echo, right? Like, Echo is forced to use cooldowns to CS, and Annie has more room to, like, run that down, and basically just everything is better because of the wave control, right? And again, the key thing being, look at your jungler. So, you know, especially at this time when, like, Bel'Veth is on Krugs, this is a really dangerous time to push Zanny, because Bel'Veth is so far away and, like, can't actually help you. And if you're, like, a flashless and mobile mage, you know, this is, you're kind of asking for it if your wave ends up pushed. Now, eventually it is just going to push back, right? Like, he froze it for a while, but eventually it does push back. You're kind of hoping here that you have a big enough wave that'll kind of protect you. But you are vulnerable here. Like, it is worth noting, especially if you don't have any wards, that you are pretty damn vulnerable here. And so he's probably going to save E defensively. So at least in a very worst case, like, you can run away. See here how he gets like more confident as Bel'Veth gets closer, and now that Bel'Veth is like looking for invade, it becomes much more valuable to push, because that means if Bel'Veth does get into trouble, that Annie is able to be there like as quickly as possible. So that's why basically he's so aggressive on the wave here. Now another thing kind of worth considering, if you can do it, it definitely requires like a little bit of mental capacity, but if Bel'Veth shows in another lane, right, so here Bel'Veth showed top with a gank, be a little careful playing mid, or playing aggressive mid, because again, like, the enemy team knows that, like, Bel'Veth will not be counter ganking, basically. So this is kind of a spooky window. Now, Echo does not have the best gank setup, and Diego's pretty behind, so, like, maybe you can get away with this, which is probably what he thought. But that is, like, a risky window, you know, like, you definitely can get punished on this timing. Fortunately, he's ahead enough that it doesn't look like it matters, but I would be very cautious of that. Gets the wave shoved in, gets the reset off. Grabs the pink, especially if you're going to play sweeper. I think going pink early is kind of nice to give yourself some vision. And also, like, pink in general is just quite good for Annie. Like, you can easily cheese people on it. Now, one big mistake I see from, like, kind of average Annies compared to people that are very good at Annie is the bear control. So, like, it's really easy to fuck this up. I see a lot of Annies just, like, let their bear get killed. But, you know, it's really important to, like, micro it back and make sure it doesn't die. Because, like, you can use it to just, well, block skill shots for you. You can use it to essentially, like, play aggro with your E and stuff. So basically just, like, make sure you pay a lot of attention to that. I think it's totally fine to use it early like this, as long as you make sure that it doesn't die for free. You know, like, it actually regens pretty quick when it's, like, out of combat. But, you know, if you just, like, let it get chunked for free, obviously it is kind of bad. Like, look here. I just want to go back a little bit. So you see that it has, like, low regen, basically, like, while its class is, like, in combat. But then the moment it gets out of combat, it gets, like, a shit ton of regen. You'll see here it goes, you know, it starts ticking up massively. So it is totally fine, again, to use it to take damage, but just make sure that it stays away and stays alive. Okay, we actually got that off. I thought he was dead for sure there. I actually thought that was Bel'Veth too, I gotta be honest. But okay, that's pretty good. I mean, we got the Echo off for free, which is super, super valuable. We just keep shoving the wave in. Bear eventually times out. That is, okay, I guess, like, one more min-max is, like, as the bear gets lower on the timer, you don't care about keeping it alive, right? So at that point, you might as well, like, let it take more damage for you, because it's gonna die anyway. So there is a lot of min-maxing to the bear, I think. That's, I would say that's the main skill. I didn't mean to press back there, but that's fine. Okay, so just taking a lot of plates, just really abusing, like, Annie's early game. And again, I kind of want to just, like, point out, like, how much damage Annie's runes have done, right? Like, we're currently sitting at, like, what is this, like, almost 900 damage done purely from runes, which is a huge amount of damage, right? Like, there's a lot of champions in this game at the moment that play their runes more than actually the champ, and I think Annie's a good example of this. Actually, I think most electrocute users are a good example of this, particularly if you use electrocute and sudden impact. Like, you are literally playing your runes early game rather than playing your champ. You're just thinking, like, how can I proc electrocute? Now, how can I proc sudden impact or whatever? They're gonna shove here. Now, this is a little spooky. I think you probably should base and TP. So one thing, and I see you guys make this mistake a lot, is you've got to be really careful looking for fights with lots of gold. Right, so currently Annie's sitting on 1400 gold. Probably should just hit the base, because if you don't, then, you know, and you fight with all that gold, like, there's a really high chance you lose that fight. So it's, like, really tempting to go and hit dragon with Bel'Veth. But actually, the best way to secure this dragon is to base TP, and that way, if this is a fight, you know, you could TP flank them. Or, you know, maybe you lose the dragon, but at the very least, you'll be here and you'll, like, win the fight after. So Another very common mistake, looking for fights without ult, without resources, with a lot of gold unspent and stuff. Now, huge item gap for you to abuse, right? Like, if you take a look at the combat stats from Annie compared to Echo, plus the level advantage, Annie is at this, like, major lead. So trying to just force trades is super easy, right? Like, you can see it's not even close. And that is actually one thing, like, if you notice, again, that your opponent has invested a lot into non-combat stats, right? So I always see this, like, things, well, like, tier is a good example, like, anything mana related, or movement speed if you're playing a champion that's got no skill shots. You can, a lot of the time, just, like, mega stat stick your opponent, which is exactly what happened here. Like, Echo just dies, and honestly, like, Echo didn't even really play it that poorly. I mean, I guess you could say that shouldn't have been so far up, which is true, but, like, that is just kind of the reality of if you invest gold into things that don't impact the laning phase, and your opponent does, then you've got to be really careful and, like, really avoid the fights. And I actually think that's one reason, like, Catalyst is so broken, is because I very rarely see people kind of adapt to what items the enemies buy. So for example, if you're against someone that buys Catalyst, they've invested very heavily into, like, neutralizing, right? But the weakness of Catalyst is that they lack wave clear. Now, Catalyst obviously still really giga broken item, don't get me wrong, but, like, if you're playing a champ with a lot of wave clear, at that point you can kind of skip or, like, ignore them basically and just focus on hitting the wave because they don't have the AP or whatever to actually keep up with them. So anyway, I think this game might already be over. It looks pretty damn good. So I guess, like, the main things we want to take away from this game is probably just, like, well, yeah, I guess, like, playing Annie, I don't even know. Is there anything, like, super advanced here? Probably not. I guess the only thing would be, like, being aware of, like, what windows you're vulnerable. And I guess, like, a little bit of, like, how to play with the bear. And also maybe just the strength of, like, early game runes, you know? Like, there's a lot of runes in this game that are super broken early game. I mean, we saw that in the Diana game as well, but I think particularly here again on the Annie, like, runes like Electrocute are just so broken, right? You do have to be careful because the domination tree itself is kind of trash. But for a champion that can use Electrocute this well, and also makes use out of some of the other runes too, like Cheap Shot, then it becomes worth it, basically. And that's why I'm not sold on First Strike, because it's like, sure, First Strike scales better than Electrocute, I think that's true, but does it scale by enough better? That's not very good English, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like, does it scale so much better that it's, like, not, or that it's worth giving up this much early game power? I think the answer is not really, right? Okay, so here, I want to kind of talk about this a little bit, because I see this is another, like, common one. So you might be wondering, you know, why is he bought here when he doesn't have TP, right? Because, like, that means if his team gets into a fight that he can't be there, and that's true. The thing is, though, like, you don't really want to run into this fight anyway. So let's go back a little bit, right? Currently, it makes sense for Annie to walk bot, right? Like, Velvet is next to him. There's probably going to be mostly plays around bot, so it's totally fine to be bot because, like, nothing should happen top, right? And that's exactly what's going on here. Now, whether or not this is a mistake, I would say it's not. But if you do decide to use your bear for the 1v1, you're not really looking to teamfight, right? It's kind of the same with a champ like Ahri or Aurora. If you decide to ult in the 1v1, you're going to be useless in the skirmish. So the moment you decide to commit this, whether it's a mistake or not, you need to commit to that, right? Be like, okay, like, I'm playing for 1v1 now until my ulti comes back up, basically. And that's probably why you don't see him, like, rotate mid at all, because there is just no point. Like, if he goes up, like, what's he gonna do? As an Annie without ult, he's just not gonna have value. So instead, better to kind of play to this, like I said, 1v1 win condition, continue pressuring the turret, and not really have any, not really have any involvement until the ulti comes back up, especially when he gets TP as well. And one of the easiest ways to throw a lead would be to, like, spend some time kind of, like, walking around the map there, right? Like, if you walk to that team fight and you don't get anything done, that's like a solid minute or so that Echo farms his way back in the game, right? So you've got to be really careful. Like, one of the things you've got to be really strict about yourself with is just making sure that you're really pressuring as much as you can at all times, right? Like, be very careful of wasted time. Junglers are, like, very familiar with this concept, right? Like, anytime you spend ganking, if it doesn't work, like, you show on the map and you give opportunity to do camps, it's kind of the same with mid, right? Like, you're giving up the opportunity to farm and also the opportunity to stop your opponent from farming. That champ's so disgusting. I hate Ambessa. But thankfully she didn't die. Probably do need to get a reset up here before the dragon. Like, really important that you spend your gold before the dragon spawns, and it looks like it's spawning how soon? 30 seconds. So really need to get this base off. before the dragon spawns. I think, in my opinion, this is a mistake, like staying longer. I think probably what he's thinking is like, okay, the enemy team can't start dragon on spawn because they're too weak, and he has TP available. So he's probably thinking, okay, like quickly cheese this guy, and then we can base TP on the map if we need to. Guess it worked. Personally, I would not have made that decision, but I guess that's why he's Showmaker and I'm Shok. So yeah, I mean, that worked pretty well. If you can get away with that, that's like really valuable, to be honest, because you get a whole extra wave, which is great, and maybe you can even take the turret because no one's here. So yeah, fuck yeah, that was a huge play, honestly. That worked out really, really well. Gonna go home, spend the gold, make sure he's really strong for dragon. If you can get extra gold to make sure you can consistently buy Rod as well for Shadow Flame, that's really valuable, because Shadow Flame is another item that the build path is like a little hard to pull off sometimes. Like if you base, for example, on like 2 amp terms or whatever, and next base you don't have enough to buy Rod and you can only spend 300 gold on your alternator, then you're in a bit of trouble, right? Because you're just sitting on a lot of gold. So normally Shadow Flame is a hell of a lot better if you can consistently buy the Rod. Anyway, I think this game is like pretty much over, so I don't think there's really much point looking at the rest of it. I'll just quickly take a look at the team fights, but I think any team fighting is pretty straightforward. Anyway, I just wanted to show you guys this because, you know, again, like, I think what's cool right now is there's actually some like pretty simple champs that are quite overtuned, so that means, you know, a lot of the time, like, the very best meta champs are actually very hard to play. But at the moment, I think you guys can really get some free elo by playing champs like, you know, you can play the Annie, you can play the Diana, you can play the Ari, right? Like, there's a lot of champs that are very overtuned, not insanely difficult to play. And honestly, it's something I want to try, too, is well, the Annie and the Diana, they both look pretty good. So yeah, anyway, I think that's it for this video. If you guys have any questions or anything, leave them in the comment section below. Let me know if you'd like to see more of these types of videos. Come check out my stream, currently bootcamping in Korea. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you guys next one.